Hello! Okay, I managed to catch an advanced screening on Wednesday night of Sisu. Now, the film has been out for a couple of weeks in America. I believe it was April it came out over in the States, but it doesn't come out here in the UK until the 26th of May. But I managed to catch an advanced screening of it Wednesday night. I heard a lot of positive buzz coming from this movie and a lot of people liking it. So I was really looking forward to checking this out because it just sounds right up my street. You know, I just really like a good old-fashioned revenge film done well. So the film follows a gold prospector who attempts to secure his stolen gold and defend himself from a German death squad led by a brutal SS officer. I want to start off with saying how much I loved the look of this film. I loved the look of the grindhouse feel that this movie had. And do you know what? I think this film would look beautiful on VHS. I would love to watch this film one day on VHS. And it does. It has that sort of really kind of dirty, grimy grindhouse feel. And they do it beautifully. I loved it. Sisu is basically John Wick versus Nazis, and I just loved every damn moment of this movie, from the beautiful shots of the desolate landscape, the stunning cinematography that really captures the hell that these characters are in and what they're experiencing. The cinematography in this film was quite beautiful, to a thumping score. I absolutely loved the soundtrack in this movie. I will definitely be getting it on vinyl. I hope they release it on vinyl anyway, because I just really dug the soundtrack in this film. And this entire experience is a very grim, bleak experience with no hope. And the filmmakers, they do such a fantastic job at sort of really bringing that feeling to life and just immersing you into this hell and this experience. And I just found the overall experience to be quite visceral. And I just found myself immediately hating the villains in this movie. Yes, they're Nazis, but it's also just like from the brief glimpses of these characters and what they have done or what they've just done, to sort of their performances with sort of these nuanced expressions through their performances, you just really sort of hate these characters. I think the performances all around are very good, very real, very natural. What I thought they did really well with the characters in this movie was give these characters personality with very limited dialogue. These characters are given these personalities, you know, like you do instantly hate these characters, but it's because of the visuals and the performances from these actors playing these characters that give the person, to really inject personality into them. And I really like that because it's done through very limited dialogue, and I dug it. This is a very brutal, violent, it's ultra violent to be honest with you, movie, and I loved it. There's a lot of practical effects when it comes to the gore and the blood and sort of the close-ups of scars and scars being healed back up. It looked so real. It looked like actual flesh, and I dug it so much because it just makes the film feel more real and grounded, even though it does get a little bit bonkers and a bit crazy. You know, it still keeps it, you know, grounds it into sort of the sense of reality. It just helps really give the movie this groundedness that I think it needs. And I just loved the very limited, if any, use of CGI. Like, there's barely any CGI in this movie. It's mostly in the third act, but when it comes to the blood, the violence, the gore, the deaths, a lot of it is practical, and you can tell that. And it's not too comic-y, it's not too cartoony, it feels real and just really adds to the experience. You know, if you've watched me for a while now, you'll know where I stand with CGI and sort of the overuse of CGI. And I think in films like this, you should just use practical as much as you can, because there were moments in this movie that made me wince, and I had to turn my head around because it looked so real and it was so ultra violent. Like, it's over the top, but just also like very real, and like that would happen. There's dark comedy dotted throughout the movie that really sort of helps lift us from the sort of the dark, grim reality of this movie and sort of the time in which this movie is based. And they do a great job at sort of injecting that dark humour within this movie. There are moments in which it's quite risky and edgy when it comes to that dark humour, but I really liked it, and it just kind of reminded me that we don't really get films like this anymore that take risks and are just a little bit risky and edgy. It just really reminded me, it just sort of transported me back to when I was a kid and I used to sort of sneakily watch these ultra-violent action movies on VHS, from the 90s and the 80s. They did a really good job at just transporting me back to that age. And it does. The entire movie has that kind of 70s, 80s, 90s action, ultra-violent feel about it, and I loved it. And they just don't make films like that anymore. But when it comes to the humour, I think it worked, and it really, you sort of needed it, and it was balanced. The tone was very well balanced, and it just overall works. And there are moments which are a little bonkers, but you kind of need it, and it just works well with the tone and the themes that are just happening, that's going on within this story. Jonah Tomilla, I think that's how you pronounce his name, apologies if it's incorrect, who plays our lead, the retired commando and gold prospector, or known in the movie as the Immortal because he refuses to die. He is simply fantastic in this movie. You believe in him, and he just gives his it's very real performance, and you just believe in his character. And even when at times things just get that little bit crazy, his performance grounds that craziness, and you believe in his burning desire for revenge. You feel his pain. He barely utters a word throughout the movie, but again, so much is said through his performance with his expressions and his nuanced expressions. And the film's narrative, the story, it's very simple, it's very straightforward, but it's all these elements that I've mentioned, the cinematography, the performances, the way the film is shot. It's all those elements that just make this movie such an immersive, fun thrill ride. Like, it is a love letter in a way, I suppose, to sort of the 70s kind of grindhouse, ultra-violent films of those times, and they do it really well because even though it has that grindhouse feel, it doesn't feel like they are doing it just to be grindhouse. It has its own kind of style and energy and sort of feel about it. It doesn't just feel like that someone is going, oh, I want to make a grindhouse movie and I'm just going to try and make it as grindhouse as I can. No, it's more than that. It's definitely inspired by those movies, but it still has its own kind of flavour, its own stamp. Sisu was a great 90-minute ultra-violent, fun, revenge action movie that really sort of transported me back to being a kid again, watching those sort of, sneakily sort of watching those 70s, 80s and even 90s violent action movies. And there's a blend of different other styles from maybe other directors. There's a little bit of Tarantino in there, but still retained its own design and feel, as I previously mentioned. At times it felt like a western, and I loved that. And even the soundtrack, there was something about the score in this movie in certain moments, certain pieces of the soundtrack that really reminded me of 90s action movies which were scored by Hans Zimmer, like Broken Arrow, Face Off, Con Air. There are moments that just made me feel like I was watching Con Air again for the first time on VHS, and I just almost burnt that VHS out because it was one of those films when I was a kid that I just used to watch over and over and over again. So yeah, it was a mix of kind of vibes and feelings for me that just really took me back to being a kid when I first fell in love with film. And as a result, this was just such a great experience. It's a very simple, straightforward experience, but it's a very well done experience. It is a simple revenge movie. It can be as deep as you want it to be, but it's also very fun, very imaginative, it's very creative, and it's a good time at the cinema. Sisu is a fun, immersive experience that, it felt real. It's a little bit bonkers, it gets a little bit crazy, but you kind of needed that. to sort of really kind of lift you from the dark, grim reality in which this film is based. So I think the tone was perfect in this movie. And you've got characters that you're supposed to hate. You've got a character that barely utters a word, but you're absolutely rooting for all the way because of just the way in which he brings his character to life. I felt like it's a very well-made movie. The third act does kind of go... There's a lot more CGI used in the third act and just kind of really escalates in terms of sort of how mad this film goes. But again, reminded me again of those 90s action movies like Con Air. There was just elements of this movie, especially the third act, that reminded me of Con Air, especially with the soundtrack, and I fucking loved it. So yeah, they are my thoughts on Sisu. Really liked it, and it's a film that I would love to go and see again in the cinema. I'm hoping to, in fact. So yeah, I will be giving Sisu a 9 out of 10. So yeah, they are my thoughts. What did you guys think? Have you seen it? Did you catch the advanced screening over here in the UK on Wednesday? Please let me know below and let's get a discussion going. You might have agreed with me or disagreed. Let me know. And if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to see future reviews from a geek in Wales, just ramble on, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot. My next review would be for Fast 10. I'm catching that tomorrow morning, so I'm looking forward to bringing you my thoughts on the latest Fast and Furious movie, number 10. Like, wow. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it, and I'll be seeing you guys soon.